Now, concept number 2 that I want you to be aware about with respiration is the fact that depending on who you're learning it from, and I appreciate you watching this video and taking the time to learn it from myself, but there's a lot of different opinions out there as far as what's necessarily right or wrong with respiration. I kind of go over this in the free training that we have on the Sports Rehab Expert website of the 12 myths of strength and conditioning and rehabilitation. Respiratory, the respiration is one of those myths, is because a lot of people feel that there's only one right way to breathe or perform respiration, or because the body is inherently asymmetrical from an internal organ anatomy standpoint, that we should always bias an individual to breathe in a certain particular way or a certain particular manner because everybody's pattern or everybody has a particular set of tendencies. But in my opinion, the reality of the matter is everything is right depending on the context. So you may choose to perform respiration in a particular manner based upon the context of the activity. So if I'm going to perform a deadlift, it's going to be very different how I'm going to breathe than if I'm running a 400-meter dash. It's also going to be very different how I breathe at rest when I'm just sitting here, and it's also going to be very different when I'm breathing, say if I'm trying to do a toe touch. So breathing is always very context dependent, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, we don't necessarily need to be consciously aware about how we breathe 24/7. Now, the respiratory system being one of the few systems that you can actually draw your conscious awareness towards and change how you're performing respiration, but then also do it autonomically, is a unique aspect where it's your way of intervening into the autonomic nervous system, because all the rest of the autonomic nervous system you actually have very little control over, whereas the respiration cycle you have conscious control over, so you can change how you perform it, which can then change autonomics. So it's your entryway into treating and training autonomics in an individual as well too, which that's the really cool part about it. So keep that in your mind as well. Furthermore, when we're talking about biomechanics and asymmetries, you don't necessarily need to always emphasize one direction all the time. The goal of any individual is to be reciprocal and alternating human being. So if we're truly a reciprocal and alternating human being, that should mean we experience two extremes to its fullest. It doesn't mean we're narrowed or we're biased towards one extreme. It means we're experiencing both extremes, so we can choose which direction we want to take or emphasize based upon the context of the scenario that we're doing, and we also don't have to consciously be aware of how we do it all the time. The simplest analogy I can give you is relating it to other movements of the body. So we need to experience left rotation and we need to experience right rotation. We need to experience pronation, we need to experience supination. We need to experience happiness, we need to experience sadness. If we don't experience two extremes, we have no idea what center is, and we have no idea based upon the context of the situation which direction we should occur. But if we've experienced two extremes, now we have a better understanding of both ends of the spectrum, and we can choose what to emphasize whenever we want based upon, again, any different given scenario, because we've experienced that scenario before. So taking this back to breathing again, we need to experience expansion, we need to experience compression. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. We need to experience inhalation, we need to experience exhalation. So you need to emphasize both. It's not just a matter of trying to emphasize expansion or trying to emphasize compression. How you coach an exercise can actually be fairly simple, because you just emphasize both extremes and you're trying to emphasize the entirety of the full spectrum of the respiratory cycle. So, all right, so to kind of top this video off here, we're going to show you two of my favorite exercises to start utilizing to teach the individual, whether you're in a rehab standpoint or a strength and conditioning standpoint, to start experiencing the full excursions of both ends of the spectrum of the respiratory process. Again, if you're experiencing that full excursion, that full spectrum of the respiration cycle, then the less specific you actually have to be. And it's more useful to start general anyways as you start learning the whole concepts, because then you're going to be able to start applying this information clinically to start getting some knowledge of results of actual utilization and presentations that you've treated or used before with your gym members, to start having a better understanding of what's going to be useful, what's not going to be useful, when to use it, why to use it, for what particular scenarios. So if we start general, kind of with that broad experience, that full spectrum, it's going to be useful for the individual, number one, because now they have a wide experience of both extremes, but then it's also going to be useful for you too, because now you can be teaching the full spectrum to individuals. And then the more and more you get presentations from experience, now you can get more specific with what particular subset of the cycle that you might want to emphasize or bias somebody towards based upon their tendencies. So two of the exercises here, the first one that I'll show you is something that I call the Redeemer. Very simple exercise, getting someone in hook lying here. All that we encourage them to do first and foremost is exhale to bring the rib cage down, flatten the back out on the ground. So a couple ways that I do this: I'll stick my hand underneath their back, just tell them to flatten their back out on my hand, and then that a lot of times kind of accomplishes it depending on the rigidity of the rib cage. If they don't quite get all the way down, then what I might have them do is reach up towards the ceiling. I'll grab their hands with my hands as a clinician, kind of have them put it together, hands together like they're praying, and then I'll grab the wrist and kind of lift it up towards the ceiling as I use my other hand as a counter and pushing down on the rib cage. If you don't feel comfortable doing with that because you're a trainer, you can just have them reach up into like a 25-pound plate, and that resistance using the serratus will also help flatten their back out and bring the rib cage down. So when you tell them to flatten their back out, you're always kind of following that up with bring the rib cage down, so that they know the rib cage movement is associated with that as well too. Now once they get that, they're probably in a position of relative posterior pelvic tilt. Likewise, also because they're in a hook lying position, they're probably in a relative posterior pelvic tilt at that time. So all that you need to do at that moment is just cue a little bit more of a posterior tilt, just to get a little bit more of that back flattening to the ground, and then we'll reach the knees forward to roll and scoop the hips up off the table. So now they have their hamstrings utilized concentrically to help secure a pelvis, with the pelvis directly underneath a rib cage. So we have that stacked presentation of rib cage over top of pelvis. So now we're in a good position from a sagittal plane standpoint to experience the full excursion of respiration. So then we'll isometrically hold this position, and then we'll encourage about a 4-second inhale. Start in the low back, think like a glass filling with water. That glass would fill from the bottom up, so we want to drive that pressure down deep into the low back, the pelvis first, and then it should fill up into their back, and then fill up into their chest. So that time period takes about 4 seconds, and then you follow that by a full exhale. That exhale is going to be about 6 seconds, and they're just going to make sure they get all of that air out, constantly moving air volume. You do not want to think like you're blowing through a straw or kind of holding any air back. We want total air volume moving. Some other intricacies as far as if someone's a narrow or wide infrasternal angle, we'll kind of get into that in some later videos, but for now, just know that you're trying to get all the air out of the system, and then you're going to pause. The pause allows for a little bit of extra time for the diaphragm to dome, and again, feel that create that full excursion of exhalation, inhalation, so you have that full spectrum of variability through the respiratory system. So that's the kind of the way you would coach the exercise. Now, depending on that individual's motor control, they may not get all of that at once. So you might have to start with a particular subset of that respiratory variability first and foremost, and emphasize that for a while before you encourage the whole spectrum of respiratory variability. So what you need to do first is, again, sagittal plane takes priority. So if we got the individual to drop the rib cage down, if we got them to tilt their pelvis a little bit, use their hamstrings, secure that pelvis, they should already be in a position of exhalation. If they're not, then again, you would exhale, you would encourage a gentle inhale just so they have air in their system, so they're not feeling like they're going to suffocate. And then they exhale all that air out to flatten the back out more, bring that rib cage down. Again, you can push down on that rib cage and lift up on their arms to help them feel that, or you can just have them reach into a 25-pound plate to have them feel that. Once they have that exhalation position in that rib cage stacked over top of pelvis, now we can start coaching the inhalation side of things more. But if we don't establish that rib cage down position first, then we're going to struggle with the inhalation, because the inhalation is just going to push them right back further up into their tendencies. So they need to be able to experience that lower rib cage, especially the rib cage that should be bucket handle expansion, not pump handle expansion, because that's where a lot of people will go wrong, is the lower part of the rib cage and its costocartilage detachment being more variable than the sternum portion. They'll get bucket handle and pump handle expansion at the lower rib cage, and what that does is it starts moving your center of mass further and further forward, which can become problematic from a biomechanic standpoint and just be one influence of many things that could be causing their pain and discomfort. So again, we need to get them to bring that rib cage down. Once they secure that rib cage down, they need to be able to keep that rib cage down on their next inhalation. So that's the second order of business, is after the rib cage goes down with exhalation. Again, that first priority right there. Then second priority is, can they keep that rib cage, lower rib cage down, and expand on inhalation, get expansion down into the low back pelvis, experience expansion into the back, bucket handle expansion at the lower rib cage, not pump handle expansion, and then A to P, anterior posterior expansion of the upper back, pump handle expansion up at the chest, and posterior expansion in the upper back as well too. After you have that, then it's a matter of, they're probably pretty decent at the exercise and breathing at that point in time. Then you introduce the pause on. You don't introduce the pause first, because the individual is trying to learn it, and then the pause just makes them feel like they're suffocating further, and so they're going to struggle even more with the exercise and get more frustrated with the exercise, and that's not what you want. So that's kind of the order of business, and that's probably my favorite exercise to be teaching somebody, the full respiratory excursion. Second one, just to give you another exercise to start playing around with in the clinic or at the gym, is wall press abs. So this is an ab-based exercise. Probably not the best for someone with more of a narrower infrasternal angle presentation, but again, just worry about that at a later point in time. You're still not going to do any harm by doing these exercises. They'll still be useful exercises to teach the movement and the mechanics behind it. You're just not going to get as much benefit out of the activity as what some other ones could be. But the reason why I like this one is because we can kind of push into the wall. That helps the individual create an anchor point to bring the lower rib cage down, flatten the back out on the ground, and then it works on the ability to dissociate. So by extending the legs, you're creating a longer lever arm. If you go with one leg, there's less load than two legs. Obviously, the longer and further the legs get out away from the body, the longer the lever arm becomes and the more load is applied to. So there's two variables you can manipulate there as far as the load applied, whether that's two legs or one leg, or the distance that they extend their legs. And the further they can go out with both legs, the more variability or the more dissociation capabilities they have from their thoracic, pelvis, and extremity, because it takes a lot of core control, strength too, but you have to have strength and control, not one or the other. You need both. So you have to have strength and control. We create that control to be able to dissociate what happens at the upper body and what happens at the lower body. So can they keep the lower rib cage retracted as they extend their legs out, or do they flare right back up into that anterior rib cage forward center of mass position that many people have that tendency to present in. So this is why I like this activity, is because it gets the individual very aware of where their center of mass, center of gravity is, and how to manipulate that, which then can become useful as you get the person standing and doing other useful exercises such as squats, deadlifts, exercises that they're on their feet with. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you got a lot out of the information in today's video. If you like this type of content, if you could do us a huge favor by liking the channel, subscribing to the channel, and hit that alert button so you get notified when any new videos come out your way. Also, if you're a rehab clinician looking to take your clinical skill knowledge to the next level and seeing how you can better help your patients, visit sportsrehabexpert.com, where we got a lot more information that can help you along the way, as well as our Certified Sports Rehab Expert course. This is 2 courses that give you a sports rehab residency or an orthopedic fellowship type education in half the time
at a fraction of the cost. So visit sportsrehabexpert.com to check out these two courses. We have the Human Assessment Mastery course and the Full Body Treatment Domination course. And finally, maybe you aren't a rehab clinician watching this video. Maybe you're someone just looking to keep an active, healthy, mobile, athletic lifestyle without painkillers and frequent visits to the doctor's office. If you're located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, you're in luck. Just visit annarbor.physio and you can set up your appointment today. If you're not from around the Ann Arbor or the Michigan area, no worries. We do a lot of online video consultation services from people all over the globe as well too. So you can reach us at annarbor.physio or at sportsrehabexpert.com, and we'd love to learn more about how we can help you out.